Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, your favorite Giants podcast. I'm your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and to my right is a sleeping cat. We have a lot of stuff to go over. The Giants will be hosted by the Pittsburgh Steelers this Monday night in prime time in Pittsburgh. But we have a lot of stuff to cover. It's been a pretty whirlwind of a week of Giants news. We have John Mara's comments to the press. We have Brian Daboll and Daniel Jones conversations to have. The Giants signed a defensive tackle. The Giants hosted a workout for a left tackle. There's a lot of stuff to cover in this. And, of course, there's the game on Monday night. So we have much stuff to cover. We're going to jump right into it. Cranky, I want to know your thoughts. John Mara I think he was at a private screening or a premiere screening or something of the Duke. I think that's what it was, where he was asked about the state of his team, etc. And the comments that got the most traction out of that was that he had stated that in terms of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, he is not going to be making a move with them throughout this season, and that he does not anticipate making one after this season is over as well. So I want to know, we'll get right into your thoughts on John Mara making comments at all, and then beyond that, where your confidence lies. Is that a vote of confidence in them? Is that just lip service, and where you stand on your confidence with these guys? So I want to know what you think.
Whew, that's a lot. And hello, Grump, how are you? Well, I generally do not like when comments are made during a regular season, because I think we are at a point now in our social media age where every comment will always come back to bite you. And I think we are, as an organization, on kind of that downward spiral right now where everything seems to be falling apart, and everything that is said comes back as either a meme or something that you may either regret saying or is going to come back into your face. So I personally wish that guys like Mara and Joe Schoen, not as much maybe as Daboll, because Daboll's the coach and he has to answer to what's going on in the field. But guys like those, I think it's best if you maintain a posture of, we're going to have all comments at the end of the season. That way, and if you keep that consistent, you can't have that turn into a narrative of no vote of confidence, because we could see what's happening already with the media, where Mara's comments are pretty innocuous. They're like, okay, I anticipate that they'll be back next year. That has already been spun by some in the media as he's promised they'll be back next year. And just to say, I anticipate them being back, or I feel like they'll be back, or at this time, that jump to promise becomes the narrative. And then that's what the narrative, which all the fans run with all the media runs with. And then when you do make a change, you have to answer for it. And that's noise. So my personal feeling is that people that are not involved on the day-to-day, like the coach does or a player, it's probably best if they just don't say anything. Now,
well, wait, you've already had a conversation about whether or not this is or isn't a promise, right? Because it's not a promise.
Exactly. I had a back and forth on Twitter with a writer who I will not give oxygen to what his name is, where his tweet directly says, or his article says, Mara promises they'll be back next year. And the article and the quote has nothing to do with the promise. His response was, well, he didn't guarantee they'll be back, but he promised. Just because you say something doesn't mean it's a promise. And I will use the example, think of when you're an 8-year-old and you're friends and you say, hey, I'll meet you after school today. And it always goes to, do you promise? Yes, I promise. Just because you say something, that doesn't mean that your word's in stone. Like if you have to, promising it is giving it that's my assurance. That is my, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm backing my words with a statement like that.
Well, yeah. So here's why this isn't a promise, right? And it's an important distinction to make. Like
course.
you are barking up the correct tree here. And while I don't really care if John Mara speaks at a thing, I think you have a pretty valid opinion, because you're right. It is already being spun this way. I saw the conversation you had, and it's not a promise, because what a promise is by definition is an assurance. When you say I don't anticipate making that change, you're saying at this time, which means there are circumstances that may change my mind in the time period between now and when I actually have to make that decision. When you make an assurance, you are saying, despite any changes in circumstances, this is what I'm going to do. That's what a promise is, despite changes in circumstances. So if a change in circumstance can change your opinion, it is not an assurance and it is not a promise. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen could still be fired at the end of this season. And quite frankly, just because, John Mara is saying that he will not make a change midseason. He still can. He can, absolutely. He didn't even promise that. He said, I won't, but he didn't promise any. There is no promise in any of the quotes. You're right.
A promise boxes you into a position that either you can't get out of, or you look foolish when you have to get out of it. And, the NFL is like politics. It's like how you deal with your family. It's like everything. Life changes, and sometimes it changes on a dime. I mean, there is history of Mara saying similar statements, and the situation has changed. The team quits on a coach says ridiculous things, and whatever reason. And I don't want an owner, a GM, a head coach, anyone to be boxed into, well, this is the way it's going to be come hell or high water. So if you read Mara's comments, I have absolutely no problem with the comments. I just prefer, don't even put it out there, because people, the media specifically, are stupid, and they're out to make their own story, their own narrative, they want clicks, they want to sell their dumb newspapers, and the fans, they don't pay that much attention, and they parrot what they read. And I'd rather not get into that, because this team is bad enough on a weekly basis watching on the field that listening to noise just makes it dreadful to follow this team.
I kind of want to know where you land on this vote of confidence, because for me, I'll give you a second to catch your breath. One of the things that John Mara said, and this is not part of the quote that's getting repeated a lot, is that his retrospective is that he criticizes himself for not being patient in recent years. And I have to think that when Joe Schoen came in, there's so much changed. When Dave Gettleman came in, throughout all the changes that we've been through here as a podcast, as fans, we've seen and talked about all of it. We started this during the Ben McAdoo era. And so we've seen all the changes, really. We've covered everything except the Tom Coughlin change. So everything to me has felt like a bridge. You bring in Dave Gettleman, who I don't think was on anybody's radar to become a GM anywhere else. Older and advanced and aged. He was not the most healthy guy. It was pretty clear he was going to retire at the end of his time with the Giants. Always felt like a stopgap solution. When Joe Schoen came in, so much changed. I mean, we had senior members of the Giants front office are no longer here. He made those big changes. He completely gutted the scouting department. He completely changed the technology of the scouting department. That felt like a more permanent, foundational change. And I don't want to use permanence as a thing for Joe Schoen, but I think that there is, when you make those when John Mara signs off on those level of changes, I think that there is an understanding that this is, I'm in it for the long haul.
We're turning the page and we're doing something completely different than we were.
So I have to agree with that much at least. You know what I mean? I think that the constant change, no franchise really can survive that. And I know tons of people will go out there and say it's like, but there's precedent of teams turning it around in 2 to 3 years. There's precedent of this. It's all fair, and I can't really argue with that. But I also don't think that just because there's precedence of that doesn't mean that it's the norm. I don't think it's the majority of times. And I think that when whichever GM was going to step in upon Dave Gettleman's retirement, which is essentially a firing, they walked into a bad roster that might have even been worse than what Dave Gettleman walked into, and an even worse cap situation. It was not an easy pick up and get moving. You know what I mean? So it was a total mess. And for my level of confidence in these guys, I'll take them. We'll do one by one. I'll just start with Joe Schoen, and I'll let you go. He's made plenty of moves that I've been critical of, and right at the beginning of the year, we talked about like just not prioritizing specialists, the cheap money saving moves. There are plenty of things that I think you can blame Joe Schoen for. He has not been stellar at drafting. I think the most critical thing I really have, and this is sort of a collective thing, is that they really started in 2022 as a pair, really truly viewing their coming to the Giants as like everyone is on a clean slate. I'm going to view this, no one is safe kind of situation. And after they had success in 2022, rather than continuing that foundational build that they were really going with, they bought into themselves. They liked the smell of their own farts. They swished it around a wine glass, and they made moves that were high risk, like Darren Waller, and they were not foundational. They were not foundational moves. Those were, getting horses when they really needed stables. I think that set this whole thing back, which was already agreed upon, I think, to be a long process. I believe Joe Schoen made that a point when he interviewed for this job that, listen, Mr. Mara, this is going to be a really big thing. If you want this turned around, it cannot happen in 2 to 3 years. You have to really overhaul your stuff. This was already agreed upon as being a long thing. Now you've just set it back a whole year by screwing this up. And that's my biggest criticism. But otherwise, I think that there's more to the GM job than the draft. I think they've done a good job of finding cheap signings to help this team throughout their time here. Going from Isaiah Hodgins to Fabian Moreau, to finding guys in the draft in the later rounds. Drew Phillips, I think, is a great pick. I know everybody likes him right now, but it's not a third round pick is a total swing. You know what I mean? Elijah Chapman was an undrafted free agent guy that they found and they made it work. I think that they do some things really well. But where's your confidence level on Joe Schoen?
My confidence level with Joe Schoen is not as high as it is with Dable, but still with confidence. A couple of points to go over. One, I feel like we've been more patient with GMs than head coaches. I mean, Gettleman was here for 4 years. Jerry Reese was here for 10 years. And I really feel that Gettleman was, again, we can all say in hindsight did a pretty poor job, but I think that was a moment in time where we wanted to clean house and start over with everything. We wanted to have the GM and the head coach on the same calendar. We wanted to make this a 21st century organization from the top down, update the scouting department, analytics, you name it. And so I think if we hadn't hit a critical mass where, Mara decided we have to press the reset button, it's possible Gettleman might have lasted another year or two. Who knows? Did a little research. As of last year, there are 16 GMs in the league that have been in the league longer and their job for more than 4 years. So, we're on year 3 right now for Joe Schoen. Gettleman had 4 years. So, the patience level, he's almost at the league average of how long, GMs normally get. Again, the more successful ones have guys that are there longer. A team like the Steelers, they keep guys and they're just like, this is it from hell or high water. So I think the patience level from the team building standpoint, I think has been okay. I think that, the size and the scope of what had to be done when Shane was hired is massive. And if I would have gone back and done it again, I personally would have tried to get a GM probably with who's been through this before. Not saying get a 70-year-old or something like Gettleman, but an experienced GM, because a lot of mistakes have been made by Joe Shane, could be chalked up to he's a first-time GM. And for the task at hand, salary cap hell, roster that's a mess, having to bring in a new coach, all of these things, maybe may want to consider bringing in a GM a little more experienced. But what's done is done, and I think our cap situation is improving. I can honestly say that with this roster, if you have one player at one position who's different, it might be a different story of the trajectory of this team. But that's the way it is. So my confidence level, I'm willing to keep rolling with Shane, although I do feel more confident about Brian Daboll and the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with that. Brian Daboll is going to get some level of criticism from me as well. We went last episode right away. This is the easiest example of us being critical of Brian Daboll kicking the field goal on third down with 9 seconds left. I stick with that. There are other things, shuffling the offensive line. I think the way there's plenty of criticism to give both of them in 2023, how they handled the offseason. And I also think that a lot of Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, I have no real evidence to support this, but no evidence to go against it either. I think they're very lockstep. So any criticism I throw at Joe Shane for the way 2023 offseason strategy was, to smell our own farts and build on our own momentum rather than continue to build upwards. I think some of that is shared with Brian Daboll, because I think that they were lockstep in that. Again, I have no evidence of that, but I just don't think that Joe Shane went totally rogue and was just like, yeah, we got this team. You know what I mean? I don't think that happened.
No. And again, we're also dealing, it's a little hard to properly critique a coaching staff based on the talent that they're dealing with. The decision to go for it or not go for it. Well, if he had his quarterback, if he had a better, would he be more consistent in his decision making? He'd be more aggressive in his decision making. We don't know. That's kind of, how much is playing in his head. I have to play with the hand I'm dealt. If I'm dealt a 16 on a face card, I have to play differently than if I would another way. So I'm going to give a slight benefit of the doubt to some of the decisions based on how do I maximize my chance to win with this pile of shit that I have, but just a little bit.
And I think when you're making a big change like this, a long runway is necessary. This is from 2022 on. This is a big upgrade for the entire franchise. Like I said, they gutted the scouting department. Senior members are gone. This was a big decision. I think that if it weren't that situation, you could point at things like the Daniel Jones contract and say it's inexcusable, or busting on picks 5 and 7, or not nailing picks 5 and 7 in a draft are close to fireable offenses. And I would agree with that normally, but you've sort of signed up for this long runway, I think. And if you're going to do that, you kind of have to have a longer leash, in my opinion. I don't think it's just continuity, but I do think that this is something that you just sort of sign up for a longer runway. And I don't think any of those things are so egregious that it's absolute mismanagement. I do feel that today's roster that has been put together, I really truly believe in this offensive line that they've put together. It stinks that Andrew Thomas is hurt, and it stinks that there's no depth right now. But This is the best 5 group of starters we've seen on the offensive line in a while. This is the best 3 wide receivers that we've seen as starters in a while. The best 2 running backs we've seen in a while. This defense is overperforming. You know what I mean? There are serious roster holes with this defense, and yet they've made a coaching hire that is leading the league in sacks.
And that's one of my main criticisms of Joe Shane is that I feel like we haven't done a good job yet of the plan B. Like, what happens when, this offensive line is pretty decent, these starting five, but what happens when somebody goes down? Someone like Andrew Thomas, who has a bit of a history now of injuries, or the unexpected happens. What happens when our kicker goes down? What happens when, let's say that Daniel Jones gets hurt again, who has a history. I just feel like that's one of the main criticisms I have to this point is we don't have break the glass plans in place. We don't have plan Bs in place. And I don't think they've been adequately addressed. And I know you can't fix everything all at once, but once you get past that starting 22 or that 27, when you include special teams, there's problems. And I think a lot of it's not being addressed.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think the offensive line one you can chalk up to not really properly addressing it in 2023, like I said, ad nauseum. Because, there's 5 guys there. They had to bring in a ton of guys this offseason just to get the starters together, and that's kind of sort of why there's no depth, right? Yep. But you're 100% right. They brought in Drew Lock. They chose Drew Lock to be the backup plan, and he stinks. Flat out stinks. There is no backup plan for Daniel Jones. There is no backup plan for Graham Gano or Jamie Gillen, and we've seen that. We've seen where that has literally bitten them in the ass for the Washington game. They had no fucking plan, and that is. I hope we've seen evidence that they have looked at their past mistakes and rectified them by changing how they do things in the future. And I hope that that's something we continue to see. A first-time GM that is continuing to learn, a first-time head coach that's continuing to learn. And, making mistakes is something that you can't prevent. Bill Belichick makes mistakes. The key is whether or not you can admit to them, what you can identify them, and that you can learn from them. And that I have been seeing. I don't know that that's necessarily, enough to say keep these guys on. But, there's 10 games left for them to completely wreck my confidence. So I'm not promising shit.
Oh, of course not. No. And I think, one of the, going back to the plan B for Daniel Jones is not even so much that, he might get injured again, is what if he is completely unaffected? Ineffective. And I think that's going to lead into our next conversation, the Daniel Jones quandary we're in right now, because we are not prepared for the fact that what if Daniel Jones just sucks? And I think that's where we are right now.
And let's get to that directly. It's a perfect segue into Daniel Jones. And I guess my question is to you, when is it time to fully bench Daniel Jones? And the reason this becomes a question is because he's been benched mid-game now. That's now happened. I would normally say that, that game was out of reach, no big deal. Brian Daboll doesn't really say a whole lot in press conferences. In fact, he says next to nothing, or just outright,
which I like,
lies. I would almost say, especially when it comes to injuries. When you say week to week and a guy is going on IR, he is not week to week. That is several weeks from now. That's about a month. But he was not exactly candid, and he definitely. So we know this much about Brian Daboll, is that he chooses his words and his answers very carefully. So when he says things like lack of explosive plays, when he says I benched him to create a spark, he didn't have to say any of that. He could have said the game was kind of out of reach. He could have said, taking unnecessary hits. He could have said a million different things. He could have said nothing, but he said what he said. And so I think that really is the first step to the Daniel Jones benching. And there's a lot of things that go into this. You know what I mean? If he does get benched, that is absolute concrete proof that he will not be back next year, right? But do you already think that that's a foregone conclusion?
I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. We basically have to jerry-rig this offense to a point where it is impotent because of what he can't do anymore. And that can't continue. And it does not look like, he's just getting back from being injured. I think this is Daniel Jones 2.0, and this is going forward what he will be. I think it's as simple as Brian Daboll made a mistake in his comments. First of all, I don't think the benching this game, that quarter, means anything going forward as signaling or anything as whether, he's going to be the starter going forward, where at some point they're planning on benching him. I honestly think they took him out because they were thinking about this game is over and he is taking shot after shot. Let's just get him out of there. Probably what he should have said. I don't know if that's the judicious way to do it. I don't know if that's finable to say we're taking him out because of those reasons or not. But saying we wanted a spark is nonsense and it's foolish because there's not one person on this planet, not even Drew Lock's parents, who think that he can come in and provide a spark for this offense. That's not the case.
Here's the thing. I don't think that Drew Lock, and Brian Daboll himself said that Daniel Jones is the starter for the Steelers game and going forward because he gives them the best chance to win. But I don't think that it's coincidence that right away when Drew Lock came in, he threw a bomb to Jalen Hyatt. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that Brian Daboll has frustrations, and we've seen Brian Daboll be incredibly emotional and make emotional decisions. I think he has frustrations with Daniel Jones not pulling the trigger on shot plays, or when he does pull the trigger, just throwing awful balls, just uncatchable shit. And I'm not saying Drew Lock airmailed one to Darius Slayton. If Darius Slayton got tackled, it would have been not pass interference because it was so uncatchable.
Well, we saw it last year too, because when Tyrod Taylor was playing, they took more shots.
Yeah.
So it's not just Drew Lock. It's just
no. I think it speaks less about Drew Lock creating that spark than it is that Daniel Jones is not doing what I want him to do. He's doing the things I ask him to do. I'm calling the plays, and when I want him to throw a 50-50 ball, and he just doesn't do it. He won't do it. I think that's where Brian Daboll's getting frustrated, and I think that's what's holding the offense back. So I do think that this benching is really you do the mid-game benching before you do the Daniel Jones is not the starter this week. You know what I mean? I don't think that they necessarily have to be back-to-back. I think you don't have to do anything, but I think it's common to do one before the other.
Let me get back to your original question, though. Beyond will he be back next year? The second point is, I think the moment they realize that this season is truly over, that's when I think the change will happen. I think it will be sooner than people think, but not as soon as people think it will be. I mean, this division sucks. And whether we think it's realistic they're going to win a division or not is irrelevant. It's, do they think they still have something to play for? And we're seeing, the Cowboys stink. The Eagles, they got a lot of problems. Washington, let's see. But I think as long as they think, and it's their professional, responsibility, their fiduciary responsibility to try to win as long as they have a chance to win, I think as much as they have criticisms, frustrations, hands up in the air about Daniel Jones, the alternative is worse. And, I hate the statement, let's try something else because it can't get any worse than this. It absolutely will.
Oh, no, that's not. Yeah, but, I don't think that's the case.
Of course. But I think as long as they are playing for something, they will go with Daniel Jones. As soon as they make that decision internally, we're not winning anything, we're not going to the playoffs, that's that, I think he will be benched. So my answer again is it'll happen sooner than the end of the year, but not as soon as people want it to be.
I think it happens in November.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's a little sooner than I think the logic says, okay, the season is over, but it's not going to happen anytime in, the next week or two.
So we have to talk about the injury clause. Dan Duggan wrote a very good article explaining the finer points of this. The Giants are set to save about $30 million by cutting Daniel Jones next year. They still have to pay some of his salary, but they get to, create cap space and get rid of someone that they don't believe is part of the future of what they're building. The problem is that some of that money goes away if he cannot pass a physical. I want to say it's like $22 million of that goes away if he can't pass a physical by the start of the 2025 season.
Mm-hmm.
It would take a pretty serious injury for him to not be able to pass a physical next, like, August.
4 months out. Yeah.
August is very far away. I mean,
is it August or April?
Well, there's two things here. So give me a second.
Okay.
It's August is for the full 22 million, which I believe is the correct number. There is a trigger for the 5th day of the league year, which is March 16th. There's 12 million wrapped in that. I think it's 23 million. There's 12 million wrapped in a guarantee that if he can't pass a physical by March 16th, the 5th day of the league year, 12 million is guaranteed. So then he gets that and you miss out on it. The other 11 million happens at the start of the 2025 season. Okay. Considering he's sustained the ACL injury in, what was it, November of last year?
Early November.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was perfectly fine. I mean, he was in training camp. You know what I mean? So, like, in July, he was here and able to pass a physical. It would take a really serious injury for that August date. But that March date is real close. Mm-hmm. Real close. So I have to think that is factoring in. Because you have $12 million in cap space is a serious thing. So would you bench him sooner? Would you bench him now if you were GM Cranky fan? Or, sorry, head coach Brian Cranky fan.
I would. I would make that evaluation right now that I understand. Let's put it this way. I would, if I knew I had 100% backing from Mara and Tish and Shane and everybody, that we're on board, that we are still in the middle of this process. If we have the assurances that, we are in the middle of this rebuild, no jobs are going to be jeopardized because of the results of the final 10 games of the season. This is part of our plan, all blah, 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 blah. If I had all of that, I would do it, because I get it. We're only 2 games out for the division. Just look at this team. Be honest with yourself. This team would have to pretty much win, 3 division games on the road. And I get it, we're playing better on the road than at home. But with this roster, the way this team is playing, to have any shot, not including all of the other, non-division and non-conference games we still have to go, starting with a tough game in Pittsburgh. The hope of making the playoff is the odds are so low to me that I have to look at what is in the best interest of this franchise going forward. And I would do that. I would bench him. Daniel Jones, you have been a very valiant soldier. You have made a lot of money with this team. You've taken us to a playoff game. But I have to look for what's in the best interest of this franchise going forward. And that risk of him, getting hurt on a fluky play potentially in a meaningless game, in a meaningless part of a meaningless game potentially, is just too big for me. And I get it. I understand that we still have a lot of football left to play this year, but I'm not the owner. I don't care about revenue of people or selling parking passes or selling hot dogs or all that stuff. But logically and taking out emotion, it's the best move. And I'm doing it purely for thinking about the future. I'm not doing it because Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito or Danny DeVito or anybody gives me a better chance to win these games. It's, I don't want to be sitting there next year and having to have this guy on the roster because he's hurt, because maybe I can have a pipe dream of making the playoffs.
I think that I go into this Monday night game as the last game where I start. If I'm head coach, you go into this last primetime game with Daniel Jones as the starter, and if he performs well, you keep rolling with him until it's time to go. Obviously, if he starts taking a bunch of hits because your left tackle situation's a mess, that is going to change. But let's assume that he's taking the normal amount of quarterback hits. Mm-hmm. I think that if he does not perform well, he continues to perform the way he's performing, I think you start next week, your 1 o'clock games against Washington, etc. That's when you start. You're not in prime time anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm going to be honest. I start giving Tommy DeVito more reps in practice, and here's why.
I know where you're going, and I'm 100% with you. So go ahead.
I was going to say, Drew Lock is clearly not the answer. You know that. Tommy DeVito could be a backup for you. He has performed well enough. He seems to run the offense fairly well. You know that traits-wise, he's not going to do anything that's... He can't push the ball downfield real well. Drew Lock can't get the ball anywhere near anybody. Drew Lock is not good. And he's on a 1-year deal, right? I believe. If he's on a 2-year deal, it doesn't even matter. He's not here for the long haul anyway. Mm-hmm. I've seen enough of Drew Lock. I've seen it in training camp. I know Brian Dable's seen him in training camp. He stinks. He's not good. He can't seem to run this offense. He doesn't really have a good grasp of it. Tyrod Taylor looked better than him last year, and that I think that's indisputable. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not trying to judge Drew Lock on coming into a game in which he didn't get first team practice reps. I'm judging him based on everything I've seen of him so far this year and going backwards. I've never seen Drew Lock look like anything remotely like possibly the future. So you already know that. If Tommy DeVito has a potential future of being your backup, that's more future than Drew Lock has. I don't think Drew Lock is a viable backup for this team going forward. So you might as well get Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, what you need to see if he's a possible backup for you. And quite frankly, it's not like the drop-off between Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito is much.
I have 3 reasons why I would even consider bypassing Drew Lock, or maybe a 1 week or so bridge to get Tommy DeVito ready. 1, we've invested a lot of time in Tommy DeVito as a third-string quarterback. If to your point, if we think he's going to be a backup, a true backup that's learned this system and is ingratiated in this system, what we're trying to run, play him. 2, if he's horrible, we've already kind of conceded this season's over, and if he's horrible, more chances of us losing, which
who cares? Yeah, exactly.
With draft status, we're tanking without officially tanking. We're at least trying something, so it's constructive tanking.
Right.
And 3, let's give the fans a little something to be excited about. I mean, the atmosphere sucked on Sunday. There is not one good thing anybody can say about this franchise other than, I don't know, looking at the draft or talking about, glory days or something. The only little thing you're going to get any sort of enthusiasm or spark is having, Tommy DeVito play. He's a character. He's a personality. There's, that stuff going around. And New York right now is a very competitive market with sports. We have a team in the World Series. We have a hyper excited, popular basketball team just kicking off. Hockey's going on. The Liberty just won the championship. There's all these things going around, and even the Jets get buzz with Aaron Rodgers' soap opera and everything. So, besides, how are we helping the team in the long term versus short term to get any sort of interest at all for the fans? Play them. I don't see really a downside of playing him at this point if you're conceding the season's over anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I know fans don't want to hear the thing about give the fans something, but you're right. I mean, 2 very good baseball teams. You have a basketball team that just it had a great season last year. There's a lot of excitement as basketball kicks off now. Same thing with the Rangers. Great season last year. They're excited for this year. It's something.
It's positive. A byproduct.
It's something on the field to talk about as opposed to talking about, like you said, silly things like the draft or off-season stuff.
Well, the important thing is, too, that is not driving the decision to do it. That's a byproduct of the decision to do it. We're not like, well, what do we do? Well, let's make it exciting. Bring in DeVito. It's, well, bring him in to see if we can help his growth, if he's going to be the guy to invest going forward. And, oh, by the way, people like him. And there's a little spark when he's in there. So that's different. That's acting I honestly think like it's a responsible organization. Some of these clown car organizations like the Jets, who do some things just for buzz and just for back pages and just for clicks and all that.
In other news, the Giants signed defensive tackle Armon Watts. I think they had seen enough of Saquon Barkley running straight up the middle. I mean, it's pretty clear. Nothing was more illustrative than last week in that as soon as Dexter Lawrence isn't on the field, there is a serious problem with this defense. And Dexter Lawrence is a cornerstone for this franchise. If Daniel Jones is nothing and Drew Lock is nothing to the future of this franchise, Dexter Lawrence is the polar opposite of that. And he just cannot play 99% of snaps if that's what you want. He's going to be, if he doesn't get hurt, he will be burnt out for the future. So
it wasn't just this week either. We've seen that.
Right. No, not at all. This week was just the most egregious example, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm for this move. It's clearly a gap move. You know, we talked about on the last episode, if you're GM, you know, all these different positions that you can really address if you trade back in the draft and, you know, whatever. Defensive tackle is a serious one. It's, I would say, just as serious as corner. So, you know, I'm a fan of this. It can get them through the season without it. There is nothing more frustrating than watching a team run all over you. It's one thing. It's super frustrating, you know, as it is now, where, you know, you get to third down and teams just seem to keep moving the chains. That's frustrating, but at least you're like, well, it's third down. It's third down. You third down, anything can happen. You live for third down. That's what you do as a defense. When a team can just run at will at you, it is nothing will keep my ass in a seat, you know, sitting down like teams just running all over you.
Yeah, it's very dehumanizing because when you get down to your guttural reaction to football, it's about being tough.
Yeah,
and it's about, you know, guys in the trenches and you beat you. And when you continually get beat by just mano a mano, it is very, very, you know, humiliating and deflating.
The Giants also worked out a left tackle, DJ Humphries. It seems that they have seen enough as Josh Azudu at left tackle. And again, I'm gonna kind of spin this. I like this, and I'll tell you why. They have not signed DJ Humphries. He's also coming off of an ACL. I'm sure that money is probably a problem. I think Dan Duggan suggested that. Giants don't have any cap space right now, so I'm sure contract is probably there's a gulf between DJ Humphries and this front office. However, I like that they seem to think that Josh Azudu has a future at tackle. I disagree, but that's what they think. And they're the professionals, honestly. They've spoken to him. I've never spoken or seen Josh Azudu up close. You know what I mean? Like, they have far more access than me. That's what they believe, right? Hang on. I just want to say, they've given it a shot last year. It didn't work. They doubled down on it with a new offensive line coach this year. They're giving it a shot. And after one game, they are like, okay, maybe we were wrong. You know what? And the fact that they stuck to their guns but knew when they were wrong, I'm a fan of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy from our perspective back here to be like, Josh Azudu is not a tackle. I've always said he's not a tackle. We have nothing to lose by saying shit like that. You want to call me an idiot for something I said in May? I welcome it. I am stupid. But I don't have a job on the line because of it. They do. And if they have a whole team of people that are either agreeing with them or disagreeing, it's not like it's one guy saying this guy is a tackle, as far as we know, right? So I'm a fan of the fact that they stuck with it. They wanted to give him a chance with the new offensive line coach. They frankly didn't have much of a choice because Evan Neal is nowhere near being a left tackle. But they seem to know when it's just not going to work. So
yeah. No, I was going to say, this is his third year in the league, and they've been tinkering with him for being tackled for at least two. It's like, you got to show something to have like that belief that he can be a tackle, and he hasn't shown it at all. So yeah, you pull the ripcord and you have to do what you have to do. This is not camp. This is the NFL, where they're trying to win games. They're trying to save jobs.
So it doesn't look like DJ Humphries is going to be the left tackle for this Monday night game. It doesn't look like Evan Neal is going to be the left tackle for the Monday night game. It remains to be seen. Damn.
It's making him sick. That's how bad it is.
It remains to be seen whether they move Jermaine Illuminor to left tackle, or if Evan Neal goes to left tackle. I don't think that's going to happen. Or if Josh Azudu stays at left tackle. We're not totally sure right now. I think it's probably going to stay Josh Azudu.
I think so as well. I think we would have heard by this point. I mean, we're recording this Friday afternoon. There is an extra day to get ready, but I don't know if they're modifying their practice schedule or what. But I would think they probably would keep it as is now.
So with that being said, let's look back at our predictions from way back when, before Andrew Thomas was hurt, before Daniel Jones was confirmed stinks. Here's what we said about this game back then.
Wish I could be there, Grump. I'd love to be at this one. We went in 2007, had a great time. Giants won that game. This is going to be a throwback to 2007. I think the Giants are going to sneak this one out too, as the second of my, we shouldn't be winning this games, and we actually come off with a win. I know it's a primetime game. I know it's on the road against a tough environment, but Pittsburgh, don't look at their record last year and think they were a good team. I think they might be kind of borderline garbage. I think it's the type of team we can sneak away with a win. I'm going to take us a win with Grump's number one pencil.
I think that Pittsburgh probably has the better all-around structure for a team. I'm not going to say like straight up, but just they've been very consistent for a long time. I think they probably have the better quarterback with Russell Wilson. I think that's not even a debate, right? They have the more consistent coach with Mike Tomlin. I do think that there's some inexperience at tackle and center. You've got a second-year player at right tackle. You've got a first-year player at left tackle with rookie Troy Fautanu. Center Zach Frazier from West Virginia is a rookie as well. I think that bodes well for the Giants right there. If you can picture Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns rushing off the edge against two very young tackles, you've got Dexter Lawrence going up against an undersized, albeit good, rookie center, and then Russell Wilson in a new system at the midway point in the year, kinda. All I'm saying is that I think that this is going to be a close game. Monday nights are always a little bit weird because A, it's prime time, B, you got the extra day of rest. I am putting this in Grumpy's number one pencil. This is a win. Yeah, more optimistic look. I will say this. Pittsburgh still, I mean, they're a stalwart for consistency in this league. They've never really been a bad team, like ever.
Not in my lifetime.
Yeah. They're also not great. I know that they pounced all over the Jets last week, but a lot of that is Aaron Rodgers throwing stupid interceptions. One of them was kind of a lucky interception. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's... one of them is Garrett Wilson just flat out dropping a ball. I mean, it's hit him. You know what I mean? There's not much you can say about that. And I'm not trying to diminish the Steelers or anything like that, but 37 points there. I mean, that's a Jets team that is, I don't even know why they're bad right now. From a roster standpoint, I cannot tell you why the Jets are not good, but the Jets are not good. Right. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, I'm not super, but right now this Giants team just stinks. They stink. They have no momentum to go off of. Winning any of the games that they could have won, maybe I change my mind. But losing games that are very much within winnability, I have no reason to ever predict a win. I think this is going to be a total disaster of a game. Given that it's a Monday night, I will probably shut it the fuck off because I have work in the morning. That's really what I'm predicting. So you can give whatever score you want there. I think that this is going to be horrible. I'm thinking over 30 points for the Steelers and under 10 for the Giants.
Just Giant fans, if any of you are in Cleveland Monday night and want to go to a bar and watch Giants, Steelers, World Series, NYCFC in the playoffs. Hit me up. That might be the most exciting part of the night. Just getting together. The only thing I'm going to try to hang my hat on a little bit is this team does seem to play better on the road than they do at home. And maybe some of the things that are in between the ears, the mental part of the game that they're playing so horribly at home, maybe gets cleaned up a little bit on the road. I'm really pulling at straws here, looking for something, but I just don't know how this team puts points on the board. I don't know how they're going to do it the rest of the year. And our thing was, by the time with Russell Wilson, he would have figured out an offense by this point in the season. Well, he hasn't played most of the year, so he's still trying to figure things out. But I don't think it matters. This may be, again, another muckier game, maybe closer than people think, but we're not going to win. Put this as a loss, 17-3.
Real quick around the league, Philadelphia is traveling to Cincinnati for a 1:00 game. I think that the narrative is going to be that last week was the get-right game for Philly, but I think that they win this game in a close one, but I still don't think Philly is good. We saw firsthand, I do not think Philly is good. I just don't think Cincinnati is very good either.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that Philly wins a close one here. What do you think?
I think Cincinnati wins at home just because I think they have a better quarterback and it's at home. That's the only reasons why.
Fair enough. Next, we have Washington, I believe, is visiting Chicago. Yeah. No, Chicago is visiting Washington.
Yeah, tasty
backwards. One. I'm going...
Well, what's Daniel's story?
I do not believe Jaden Daniels, I don't think, has practiced at all this week. So,
okay.
For that reason, I'm saying Chicago, but I think if Jaden Daniels played, this is no contest. Washington wins.
Same. Ditto.
And then, last but not least, Dallas has the Sunday night game against the San Francisco 49ers. This is Niners all the way, right?
Even with all their injuries and, I still think they're going to win. This Dallas team, I'm just waiting. I have my raffle ticket of when McCarthy gets fired. I still think it's happening very, very soon. And this might be the one. If they lose a game like this to San Francisco, as banged up as they are, that might be the one that pushes them over the edge. And I'm going to hope it's this week.
Okay. I was going to say, last question for you. It's kind of a fun one. What happens first? Daniel Jones gets a permanent benching or Mike McCarthy is fired?
McCarthy gets fired.
Wow. I was going to say the other way around. So
I think the Daniel Jones thing's going to happen a little later than you people want it to be, but and I think that gives enough time for McCarthy to get. There's too many opportunities for McCarthy to embarrass himself where you have a guy like Jerry Jones who feels like he ultimately has to do something. Where I think Mara is a little more. And again, I'm not putting this on Mara as the guy making decisions for this, but I think the Giants are a little more process-based than the Cowboys are. I think it's Jerry Jones at his whim of things. And I think, when you lose to the 49ers and, back in the heyday of the Cowboys, the heyday of Jerry Jones, it was the Cowboys and the 49ers. And that means more to him than maybe it does to the average fan today who's 30 years removed from that. So
that's fair.
They get embarrassed out there. That could be the something. It's like, all right, enough.
I'm not totally sure that Mike McCarthy gets fired mid-season, to be honest with you. Not about deservedness. It's that I don't think Jerry Jones likes to do that because it's awful PR, and I think there's precedent for it. It's happened. I believe it happened to Wade Phillips, but I think that the season has to go off a cliff, and it could happen, but I don't think the cliff at 3-3. They're pretty far away from the eventual cliff. I think that the cliff comes, in December.
And I think Jerry Jones has a lot of respect for his guys like Garrett, guys like, a guy like McCarthy. McCarthy, remember, he won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He's a respected guy. He's not just...
so did Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't look very good right now either.
Yeah, he's not Dave Campos. He's not one of, one of these horrible coaches who had no pedigree. So you're right. He may give him the respect to wait, but who knows? I don't know. I just don't know.
That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for sticking with us when this episode came out a bit late. We will see you all on. Are we going to do Wednesday morning? I think we need to.
Yeah, the Monday night game, and I'll be traveling this week for work, so.
Yeah. So the episode will be off by a day. Blame it on the NFL scheduling, not on us. But be sure to like, comment, subscribe. We'll be available on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and of course YouTube.
It's all your fault, Giant fans, because the Giants are popular, not because they're good. That's why we're always on Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football. So it's all your fault why people like us.
All right, everyone. We will see you then. Until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.